Zack Snyder's Justice League. Is it actually... Of course it's bloody worth it! Go and watch it right now! Drop what you're doing! Go and see it immediately, immediately, immediately! If you're interested in my detailed thoughts on the film and why Alfred, in my opinion, is the best character in the whole film, join me after the intro. Hi, my name's Stuart. Welcome to another review on Flying Wiener. I can't believe it. It is finally upon us. Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League film is now here. This is quite a moment for myself, I must admit. If you haven't seen my Batman v Superman video in my in-flight entertainment series, you can click a link up here to see it, but if you have, you will know that I am a big fan of the Snyderverse, the vision that Zack Snyder has got for DC, and for some reason it is really tailored to my taste. It is really exactly how I would want superhero films to be. Despite also enjoying the MCU very much, I also like this other take. And so even back then, I knew before going into the cinema to watch Justice League in 2017, I knew about all the troubles that the film went through and the drastic shifts, etc. So when I came out of the cinema, I was pleased. It was an okay film, but ultimately very mediocre. I enjoyed it though. I will say I enjoyed it because it was just so much fun to see these characters come together on screen. There was just a lot of joy involved with that. But yes, you could tell that a lot had happened with the film and that it was a very mixed bag. Particularly, you could see that just the direction behind it just clashed a lot. Originally, I wanted to do a sort of comparison between the two versions, but I don't feel that's really necessary because there is no comparison, really. I don't feel so. I will give a general review of it, and I will address differences to the theatrical version. I'll do that, but I'm not going to go through and show you each and every difference because I don't feel that's necessary. There are many, many more videos on YouTube that do a definitely more extensive and better version of that. So I would highly recommend if you are interested in what exactly are all the differences, watch one of those videos. I actually myself planned on rewatching the theatrical version before seeing the Snyder Cut. Unfortunately, I didn't find the time for it because I really just wanted to have in my mind exactly what the film was like so I could make the comparisons. But luckily, again, there's so many videos on YouTube that show you every single difference, and just seeing them alone was mind-blowing. It also made it more compact, and so it was easier to digest and really do the comparison. What is interesting, and I do feel this should also be thought about, is we are not seeing the version of the Justice League that Zack Snyder would have given us in 2017, because I feel there's no way that Warner Brothers would have allowed him to release a 4-hour film in cinemas back then. I do remember there being discussions that it was originally planned as a 2-part film, which could have been done. And well, this film is 4 hours long, so you could split it at least lengthwise into 2 films. I don't think though that would have worked really well from the storytelling perspective, because probably the first part would have been a bit too bland, I'll call it, because people might have expected more action or something like that. I'm not quite sure if that would have worked, but still, you need to think about what would have been the version that we would have gotten back then, because obviously now as well, Zack Snyder, he also did some reshoots for this version, so it's not like this is all just footage from what he did back years and years. So he himself has also added and changed things from his original vision. Also, obviously, they would have taken into account any kind of criticisms that the film got back then, anything that people liked, wanted to have changed, etc, etc. I don't think you should say that if Zack Snyder had released this film back then, it would have been a huge success. We just can't tell anymore. We can only say that this version released now is far superior than the theatrical version we got, in terms of pretty much everything, I would say. Now, as you know, I typically do no spoiler reviews for the majority, but here I feel that also because we're talking about a film that you do still know quite a lot of, even from the theatrical version, because obviously a lot of that happens in this film as well. But just because of everything that surrounds this film, I feel that it only makes sense to talk about it with spoilers. So here is your official spoiler warning. If you want to see the Snyder Cut yourself before hearing or seeing stuff about it, I would suggest that you do that. I feel like I'll address the biggest things in the film that I find really, really good, and this starts really with Cyborg and the Flash. Now, you could talk about each of them individually. I don't think that's really necessary, because the main point I want to address here is that they are actually characters in the story now. The 2017 version had them as really, really small side characters. They were just there. A lot of things about them were not explained. They just appeared. They didn't really seem that pivotal to the whole plot and what was going on, or to the team itself, really, except Cyborg, I suppose, with detecting a few things about the mother boxes, etc. But this version changes that completely. I've also already seen many comments online from people who feel like me that Cyborg somehow has become the heart of the film in this version. He is so important to the whole plot, not just to finding things, but to certain developments and even the team itself. He is not just, even although he is quite clearly the youngest there age-wise, he is not just being brushed off, and he's actually really doing his part in the team. And then you've got the Flash, and for him in particular, what I really, really like is that in the 2017 version, while I enjoyed his character, and yes, he's definitely there for more comic stuff in the scenes, which is also what he does in the comics quite a lot. There's a lot of humour involved with his character, but he was at the same time depicted as being scared or not knowing what to do, and Batman tells him, save at least one person, etc, etc. I find it really, really interesting that this was seemingly Joss Whedon's input on the character, which I find really, really strange, because I've read a few Flash comics and he is always a very strong personality. At least he's definitely a hero, you know. So to see him being a bit apprehensive about what to do, that felt really, really strange back then. I am so happy that this is not the case here. This Flash, despite still being a bit neurotic and having all the comedy with him, he just jumps into the fray and he saves a whole group of people. It's really, really great to see. There's one scene in particular where he saves a group of people from falling debris, which I think was a great use of his Speed Force. Really displayed that quite well. So his character is handled so much better, and Cyborg's particularly as well. So I really, really like that. It really feels like a team this time around. You also have more on Aquaman, which is great, and generally you see a lot more in the backgrounds. Yes, of course, this is mainly because we've got a 4-hour film instead of a 2-hour film. That allows for more character development, but it shows that this was definitely something that was lacking in the theatrical version. Because Aquaman as well, when you go through the films and compare them, you will notice, I hope, at least I did, that many characters just randomly appear in places. They just somehow appear at the right place, and you don't really know why. So this version does a good job of explaining stuff. Aquaman in particular, when you look at the theatrical version, he just appears in Atlantis, the whole bit where Steppenwolf grabs the mother box. Here it is really explained to you. He meets Vulko, who we know from the Aquaman film. Interesting to see that we would have been introduced to him even in Justice League back then if it had been released. And he explains to him where he has to go and stuff. And that's just one example. You have so many others. One other I would pick is, for instance, you see how Diana, Wonder Woman, learns about the past and dark side and the whole backstory there. That introduces you to the flashbacks, whereas in the theatrical version she just appears and just tells Bruce Wayne the story, basically. Here you see how she learns of it, which is great. So much more character development. It's really wonderful. Zack Snyder's taken his time to really flesh out these characters more. You see more of Alfred, you see more of Batman even. What I like about Batman here in this version is he is a lot more a leader, I would say. Because again, in the theatrical version, he was just one of the guys. I mean, he's obviously got no powers, etc. So by default, he's weaker than them. Discuss in the comments. I'll bet that aside as a joke. He here feels a lot more like a leader, and I like it. But at the same time, he does take others' comments and input. So he shows some really great leadership skills in this version. We get a lot more Superman as well in this cut of the film, which is something I am very, very happy to see, because I love Henry Cavill's Superman. I still cling to the hope that we have not seen the last of him. I do hope that they will make more Superman films, because I just feel he is perfect for the role and it really works. And Superman gets a lot more to do in this scene. He does not have his weird CGI lip they had in the theatrical version. Although I'm one of those guys who, yes, you can tell that something's off with it, but I don't think it's such a big issue. I think it was blown out of proportion, but still, it's great to see him here without that and actually having a lot more to do and show in this film. That was the focus on the good guys. I would very, very much also like to focus on the bad guys, because Steppenwolf has stepped up in this film. It's ludicrous, really. When you look at the theatrical version, there's so much different here, and it really blows my mind why such decisions were made with the film back then. I would assume, right, let's just start, without even going into the story, just start with the design of him. I would assume that back then there was already a design for Steppenwolf. I would hope so. I mean, I would expect it, really, because surely they got through all the filming, etc. So there must have been an idea of what he was going to look like. And now if you compare the two side to side, it really makes you wonder why they went that way in the theatrical version. Because while I thought Steppenwolf was okay in the theatrical version, he wasn't really that menacing. And he looked more like, I don't know, how should I say, it looks more like a sort of old dwarf type character. He looks like, I don't know, a cousin of Gimli from Lord of the Rings or something like that. Now that I think about it, he looks more like a mix out of a dwarf and a big friendly giant or something like that. He doesn't look menacing, he's not imposing, and generally speaking, considering that he is the big bad, he doesn't really do much for the film, especially because he's dispatched easily at the end just by the gang, I'll call it. Now, if you look at this version, without going into details, you can immediately just tell the build of the character is completely different. He's got these huge broad shoulders and he's massive, he's a hulking beast. Compared to the rather, in comparison, I mean, back then in the theatrical version I thought he looks big and mighty, but if you compare the two, you can see the new version, he is really, really bulky. And then next you come to the face, which is also, it's less long, it's the helm that he's got really makes you focus on his eyes and his face. And while not as much money has been put into finish off and polish this version, I get that. The CGI is not top notch and you can tell at times. It's fine, it's suitable, it's okay, but I must say that Steppenwolf in particular, when you've got close-ups, I think his CGI is magnificent. So his face has got a lot of emotion in it, and I love that. Steppenwolf is actually a character in this version. And then you come to something which I'm sort of torn about, his armour. His armour, in many shots, again this is probably due to the lack of funding, but his armour at times looks a bit cheap. The way it's done, it looks like a very, very basic CGI job, but I love the elements in the armour because you can see these individual spikes, I'll call them, they move about a lot. And just the general design of it I think is great. It seems like a very efficient armour, whereas the original version had just sort of a standard looking armour, but you have to think these are aliens, these are gods from another world that is eons away. Surely they would have a completely different design than sort of Earth Middle Ages, you know. And I love that. It's otherworldly, it's very efficient. You can see that these spikes actually do stuff, and it just makes him look very, very threatening. And that's just the design of his character. Then you come to the story and his characterization, and it's a completely different character. We see his motivation, we see what drives him. He's been exiled, he has to conquer endless worlds. They even quote 50,000 at us. So he has to conquer 50,000 planets just for Darkseid to give him an audience again, basically. So you can see that he's really trying to prove himself, and he's menacing. And you can see that he's not just there to be a bland baddie in a film. And then you come to his fight scenes at the start with the Amazons, and he completely destroys so many of them. Horses are thrown about, all these things that you don't really see much of in the theatrical version. Turned into a pincushion, he's full of arrows, does not care, shrugs them off. So you can see from the start he is a force to be reckoned with, and it's only at the end when Superman joins the fray in the fight that they really manage to overpower him, because up to that point he's kind of holding his own against the other members of the Justice League. So it takes Superman to unbalance the scales again. So that is done really well throughout the film. He is really a threat, and there's no doubt about it, and he is absolutely menacing. I so much enjoy this version of Steppenwolf more. Overall, there are just many things that are improved here. It is quite interesting to see just how much humour Joss Whedon put into the Justice League. It's very obvious that they just had to go, and by they I mean Warner Brothers in particular, to just say, okay, let's turn this into an MCU film. We want bright colours, we want one-liners, we want loads of silly humour, and you can tell that it just wasn't the right fit, because the film was not intended that way, so it wasn't built that way to begin with. That's why they needed so many reshoots, just to add all sorts of scenes with humour in them. And I will say though that some of them work, and some I am actually sad to have lost to this version. I will say that, because some of them worked rather well. You had some that were very silly and made no sense, but others I thought were quite funny, although I get that they were left out. Some scenes I'm sad that we have missed involve rescuing people. There is a significant change. The place where the battle, the final act takes place in the Zack Snyder's cut, it is a deserted place, so there are no civilians there. The theatrical version put civilians there just so that they could have scenes where they save people. So, okay, while the Snyder Cut just clearly says, look, we don't have to worry about civilians, we're just going to have a big ass battle, that's fine. I still feel it's a shame that we missed the scene where, if you remember the theatrical version, Flash is happy that he's pushing a car with a family of 4, I think it is. He's pushing them to safety, and then you just see Superman flying past holding an entire house full of people. I just thought that was such a great comedic moment. I still love that very, very much. So that is a shame that we've lost that. And the other one would be the post-credit scene where Superman and the Flash have a race to find out who's faster. I really, really like those. Again though, if it's not part of Zack Snyder's vision, then fine. And like I say, the saving of the people makes no sense anyway, because there are none there to begin with. One scene that I'm very happy with that is in this version as well is when Superman returns and he's sort of not got his mind back yet fully, and he's fighting the Justice League, and you have Flash running around him, and the Flash then reacts to Superman noticing his presence, turning his head, and I love that scene. That was my favourite scene in the theatrical version. I just love that so much, and I'm so glad that it's in this as well. It's just such a great moment. Flash is, oh shit, he's fast as well. Humour-wise, there are other things that have been taken out of the film. For instance, I liked the Flash's joke in the theatrical version where they talk about the resurrection of Superman, and he makes a reference to Pet Sematary, and in that moment where Superman is reawoken, he goes, oh shit, Pet Sematary. That was quite fun in the theatrical version. I get that they took it out of this. While I like it, it makes more sense to just have it out, because it's not supposed to be a funny moment, and you're not supposed to be dropping these one-liners and stuff. So that is another choice, and particularly the whole thing about resurrecting Superman is so much better than this version, because that for me is the moment when the team really comes together. They're discussing how they're going to do it and what's happening, and Cyborg in particular has a lot of input, and just generally that's one of the things I really love about him, how he is handled as a character and his value to the team. Just the whole thing, it feels really, really great. Other important changes are, for instance, the music. You don't know, the theatrical version back then was done by Danny Elfman, who also input the classical Batman theme that we know from the Tim Burton films, which, while being a nice moment, I thought was kind of unfitting because it doesn't really fit into this universe, I'll call it. So the music has changed. I'm not convinced that it's all better though, because you have some scenes where you have this sort of slow-paced, nearly romantic music going on, and it doesn't always really hit the correct note for me anyway. You've got a scene in the start where Flash saves Iris West, and you've got this music going on, but it didn't really fit the moment to me. That's just one example. There are a few of those things, but generally speaking, the music is fine. One thing I feel is severely lacking in this film is a Justice League theme. One of the best things about the Avengers is that they have their theme. It's immediately recognisable, and on top of everything else, it's just such a beautiful, great theme. It just beams out this confidence, this heroic quality. I love the Avengers theme. It's one of my favourites from the comic book franchises of the world, and I just feel this is a missed opportunity to give the Justice League one of their own, which makes you raise your fist in, you know, in delight and euphoria. One thing that I found very interesting was that when you think about the final battle that takes place at Steppenwolf's base, the lighting is an issue, because if you think back to the theatrical version, it's all sort of got this red sky and everything has got this sort of bright red tint on it because of this red sky. Now the Zack Snyder version just has very muted colours, it's rather dark, and I must say, thinking about it, I am not a complete fan of either of them. To be perfectly honest. I did think though that the Snyder Cut, it was just a bit too dark really in that sense, because it made me having to focus too hard on what was going on and try to just make out shapes, etc. So I couldn't just enjoy the whole action. So I think they should have, while the red colours were just a bit much back then, I do feel that the Snyder Cut would be better in that section if they just made it a bit brighter. You know, maybe set it not quite at night, maybe just a bit sooner in the day, just to make you see a bit more, make it a bit easier on the eye. Generally speaking, the film is not as colourful as the theatrical version. They really tried to emulate the MCU also with the colours. You can tell very, very easily when you see scenes with the Flash. He is really bright red in the theatrical version. I'm happy that that's not the case. Generally, a lot of one-liners, while they are funny when you think about them, it does take away from the characters. It's like Batman's, if you remember the theatrical version, he's, oh yes, there's something bleeding, all right. It's funny in the moment, but when you think about it, it's just silly, and it doesn't need to be in there. So those kind of small jokes have been removed from the film entirely, which is great. Oh, is Justice League the best comic book film ever? No, I don't believe so. I still think if you just take it for what it is, and particularly the place where it's at in their own universe, nothing for me at the moment tops Avengers Infinity War, because it's just so rewarding going through the whole journey of the MCU to arrive at that point, and just the film itself is just so well crafted. The Snyder Cut is really great. It's the Justice League film we deserved. It's not perfect. There are various issues that I also have with it. Definitely scenes you could have taken out of this, although it's generally fine, and a big improvement on the theatrical version. It's actually funny, one thing that people are complaining about is the aspect ratio, because if you watch this film you will notice that it's suddenly more of a square than the 9:16 that we are used to when we go to the cinema, with the black bars at the top and at the bottom. The reason is quite simple. Zack Snyder filmed this as an IMAX film, and if you don't know, IMAX generally has the theme that you get to see more of the picture, so that which is usually cut off by the black bars, we just see more of. It's not that they filmed more, it's just that we actually get to see more of what they usually film, if they film in that format, which a lot of directors do. So it's a funny thing to complain about, that you are able to see more of the picture. That is what people don't realise. Usually you'd have the black bars at the top and more would be cut off. And so now, instead of having two black bars at the top, you've got two black bars at the sides. I'll be honest, I did not care for this at all. Within just the first few moments of the film, I completely forgot about it. It's not an issue. It only is if you really want it to be. I think it's great that we get to see more of each image, and you could argue that some shots work better because there's obviously more happening above and below than we typically see. With the look of the film, one thing I particularly want to draw attention to is that I would say the first third of the film at least looks to me very, very vintage comic-esque. It's got this quality to it. It's not a poppy, colourful comic, but it's one of these rather high quality ones that are drawn very nicely with really deep colours and all these things. Some panels feel particularly like a comic in that way. One is, for instance, where Wonder Woman seeks out Cyborg, she meets him and she's walking along the street, and you can just see how that could be a panel in a comic, which is really wonderful. Later on, less so. It becomes a bit more generic, I feel, so I think that in the first third of the film and first half, there's been more attention to the actual cinematic quality of it. One shot I like in particular, and to me this is actually one of the most beautiful shots in the whole DCU, might be very strange, but this is my personal choice. The scene you get to see of Cyborg before his accident, where he plays football and they've got this football match in the snow and it's dark, you've got floodlights on the pitch and everything. It's absolutely stunning. I fell in love with these shots immediately. They are absolutely beautiful and it just puts you so into the moment. It adds so much drama and tension to a game of football, and usually sports does involve quite some drama, so I feel it's absolutely fitting and just so beautiful to see it play out on screen. It does also involve some of the things I'm not so keen on in this film, which is Zack Snyder is of course a great fan of slow-mo, and while yes it's great in the football scene, he does overuse it in the first half of the film so much, in my opinion. Within just, I think, the first half hour, there already had been so many slow-mo shots that I started laughing. You know, I like a good slow-mo shot, but when you have a character like the Flash in the film, who automatically, by nature, requires you to have more slow-mo shots, I think it's just overkill to have loads of slow-mo shots for other characters as well. I feel it's overdone. Yes, they're beautiful. Yes, it's great to see. But if you overuse it, it quickly turns into a gimmick that just makes people laugh like I did. So I would wish that there were less slow-mo shots in this film. Strictly speaking, I probably like Batman v Superman more, just because it feels like a tighter film and everything just feels a bit better crafted in it. If you have seen my in-flight entertainment film, you will know exactly why I like this film. But I really enjoy this, particularly for the team, because you see how they come together, you see how they work together, and it's a big joy. That really makes you think of the Justice League and the picture, the image you have of them, and it just shows you why they are so mighty and feared by Darkseid in particular. It will be interesting to see if there is a continuation. I saw comments months ago where Warner Brothers clarified, no, this is the end of the Snyderverse, they're not going to continue. Obviously, we have got another Batman coming with Robert Pattinson, so it will be an interesting question whether Warner Brothers is going to go down the road of having just multiple versions of the same character. We already have one with the Joker already. So this will be interesting to see. Whether there will be a continuation, I believe Zack Snyder himself has said he is not interested in continuing on. Who knows if it's happened once before. If the interest is large enough, he might be convinced otherwise. I'd be interested in seeing Darkseid, because just the short snippets you get of him just show this powerful being. You see his Omega beams, which if you're not familiar with, they just dart around everywhere, so he can shoot everyone pretty much just from any perspective, because his beams, they just go wherever he wants them and wills them to go. He is definitely a very powerful being. I mean, just Steppenwolf, who is a general of his, he was already an imposing character, so it would be a lot of fun, I feel, to see Zack Snyder or just DC do a Thanos level bad guy, villain, opponent for the Justice League. It's really strange when you look at this film and you compare it to the 2017 theatrical version that we got. So much has been cut from this film, it makes you wonder why. And there's been so much in the media about it. You've had actors, Ray Fisher, who portrays Cyborg in particular. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. You've got accusations being thrown about, a lot of ugliness, I'll call it. But it is quite strange when you look at this particular cut, and as I mentioned, Flash and Cyborg in particular, for me, they really make this film stand out because they are great, they're new additions, they're great characters, they just add so much to it, and yet so much of their stuff has been changed and cut from the theatrical version, and it does feel very strange to do so. So it's really a shame, because I feel if more of them, of what we have seen here in the Snyder Cut, were included in the theatrical version, it would improve it by a lot. So, lesson I feel, which I'm sure has been repeated a lot by many other people, is studios don't interfere as much in films. So if you can watch it somehow, I highly recommend that you do so. Yes, it is 4 hours long, but surely every one of us has already binge watched a TV show where you've watched 6-7 hours in one day. If you've watched Lord of the Rings, at least 2 parts together, you will have already done so. I don't feel, it does not feel like a long film. It's fine, it's paced very well, it comes together so well, you see how characters get to places, why and how they learn of information, it just works so well on that level. I loved it, I am so happy that we finally got it, it's so hard to believe 3.5 years later. I wanted to see it back then, I'm so happy that it actually happened. I am a fan of Zack Snyder, was back then, still am, love this film. The whole viewing, I was sitting there with a giddy feeling, which I have not had often. Avengers Infinity War was one of those films where you're just sitting there and just so happy to be in this moment, to watch this art on screen. Oh, the question you've all been waiting for. Why is Alfred the best person in the whole film? Quite easy really, there's a scene where he pours himself a whiskey and I just started laughing out loud because lo and behold, Alfred Pennyworth, Batman's butler, is drinking Talisker whiskey, which is my absolute favourite whiskey. I thought it was just great, I could not believe it, I had to laugh so much. I mean, they do warn you at the start there's product placement in the film. I did not expect that, to have my favourite whiskey in Justice League. That automatically makes it the best film ever. Let me know in the comments down below if you've seen the Snyder Cut. Do you want to see the Snyder Cut? What did you think of the theatrical version? Comparisons? What's going to happen in the DCEU? Why I'm an idiot? Why my opinion is wrong? Why Alfred is not the best character? Etc, etc. Tell me all that in the comments down below. I'll thank you for watching this review on Flying Wiener. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel for more. And I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.